All right. Yo, 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 yo. What's up? What's up? What's up? Give up the rack. Yo, 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 yo. It's 4IS in the house, a mainstay on this live stream event. What's up? What's up to yourself? I hope you had a good weekend, 4IS. Like I said, a sacred time in the holy calendar of the working class. Ollie Atlas is here. Welcome. Another revolutionary joins us. A foreign correspondent too, in relation to myself in Australia. You are American, are you not, Ollie Atlas? It's good to have a few American correspondents in the house because we will, we invariably touch on American issues. Roll call. It's Jag, another American correspondent. Yeah, it's like roll call, isn't it? It's so good. Welcome. I hope you guys are still in the US living the weekend. Didn't realize Luigi had so many girls. Yes, 4IS. It is a revolutionary motto that curls get the revolutionary girls. So if you're not across that one, let me be the first to break it to you. It's actually one of Lenin's slogans for the October Revolution. Was get your curls out. You've obviously noticed that I have decided not to tie up my hair today. Thanks for bringing that one to the fore. But yes, for those of you in working class paradise still, girls, there it is. MysterE 2025. Thank you. I'll add that one to the book. Yeah, for those of you still living the working class paradise, which is the end of the week period, also known as a weekend. Fun fact, the French actually don't have a word for the weekend. So you'll hear them like speaking to each other about what's going to happen on those last 2 days of the week. And they'll be like, blah, 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 weekend, blah, 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 blah. And just shows you, I guess, the working class history of the weekend. Like it really is. If being working class was a religion, that would be our Sabbath. Because like you can see how, new it is as an idea, having to have 2 days off a week to be able to replicate labor power and labor capacity. Because the French don't even have a word in their vocabulary for it. They just take from English because, it didn't exist about 100 years ago, the idea of the weekend. That was a hard-fought battle by people like you and me, but probably more hardcore than us. Let's be honest, the revolutionaries of a century ago. Brandon Knox, good day. Well. That is twice in 2 streams. People are going to start to think that you're a regular all of a sudden. I think Jordan said that we only have weekends because unions struggled, but you'll never see that point on Sky News. Well, it is the truth of it, okay? The working class struggled for weekends. And yes, I would very much doubt, though they appeal directly to the working class, I would very much doubt if they would ever attribute it to working class struggle. I wonder why a reactionary news outlet and media corporation would struggle to find relevance in singing the praises of working class movements. I just, that one evades me. Wings of cheese, that's for sure. So anyway, today, as the intriguing and clickbaity title suggests, we're going to be continuing our conversation from last Friday, which is or centered around kind of the idea of like gauging where we were at in terms of our current material condition, about where we start a revolution from, and like, what are we working with here? And like, it was my thesis of last Friday that we need to have an understanding of where we sit in terms of broader working class consciousness. And like, obviously I made the point that like we don't have any consciousness, or it's dramatically slim, compared to where the working class was, like, 100 years ago, which was like pretty conscious, okay, pretty goddamn conscious of its existence. I can recall, no, I will recount a story that was told to me by a woman who lived through the Second World War in Australia. And when she was 14, she was taken out of school by her mother because they couldn't afford to not have any income coming in from the children. So she was taken out at the age of 14 and sent to work in the city. So in Sydney, CBD, Central Business District. And her uncle, like for the first like month or whatever of her employment, like when she would leave the house, would like make fun of her and say, ha ha ha, there you go, off working for that capitalist pig kind of thing. And like, she was 14, so she had no idea what he was talking about, but like, she remembers copying that one on the chin. But like it's safe to say that the broad level of consciousness in Australia anyway, and I know this is the case for most of the advanced and Western world, was the working class or the general population had a real understanding of, one, that like, there was this thing called capitalism, and we're under that system of economics. And then more broadly than that, that they would have just generally a problem with it. Like, you're working for the man, wage labor in the capitalist system is akin to a form of slavery. And like, that was a general sentiment, whether you decided to partake in the system or not, knowing that that was how the system operated, it didn't really make a difference because, people have to survive kind of thing. But they knew that like it wasn't a system that benefits everyone, let's say. It was like designed obviously for those with power to maintain it, with those with the resources and the means in order to reproduce their existence. It was for them. Now, like, as we were talking about last week, I don't think that that level of consciousness exists anymore at all. I really don't think the general person has any problem with capitalism, if they even knew that it existed. I think most people just see themselves living in some type of society where, like, you get a job or you start a business or something like that, and if you're lucky, you'll make it. And if not, you'll just be a pleb like the rest. And like, but nobody sees that as an economic model in itself, a mode of production in itself. They just see that as life. And like, that's the blinding power of ideology. It's like, you don't really question anything. You kind of just go about your daily grind. Whereas, like I said, 100 years ago, no, if you were a working person, you knew like kind of your place in the society, and like, it was treated with a level of disdain, or in classic Australian sense, I would say, with a very sarcastic or larrikin kind of attitude imposed upon it. Like, Australians characteristically have always had kind of a sense of anti-establishmentism about them. They have definitely looked upon themselves to kind of, stick it up the authority. Like, classic example is, if anyone knows any of the stories about like kind of the Diggers, which is like the Australian kind of military legend. So the story of like people that went off to war and fought for Australia, especially in the world wars, like when they were under the rule of the British and they were listening to the instructions from the English officers and all that sort of stuff, they did what they were told, but they didn't do it without being absolute smartasses. And so like that sense of like Australian, anti-establishment zeal is like completely gone. And I would say that in places like America, it may not have ever existed because, capitalism in the American sense was definitely kind of part of its national mythology and what made it powerful. So I'd say anything, after the Gilded Age would have just all been about like capitalism is America kind of thing. And like they wouldn't have really questioned it. But like the working class for, most of its industrial working history has really questioned like how necessary capitalism is. They would have had revolutionary aspirations, and even before that, when people were being kind of herded into wage work at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and like kind of the development of real capitalism as we know it today, people saw wage labor as a form of slavery. They called it wage slavery, and like they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. And so like there was always this tradition of working class consciousness. And like my argument last week was the neoliberal era and the neoliberal consciousness, the ideology that helps reproduce capitalism where we're at today, has completely annihilated working class consciousness today. We're all a bunch of individuals running around randomly crashing into each other, but like, you know, society itself doesn't even exist. We're just here by chance, really. You know, the Big Bang happened, some fish crawled out of the sea, and here we are living under capitalism. You know, it's natural, really. If anything, the Big Bang and that fish crawling out of the sea, which ended up where we are at today, was a pre-stage of capitalism. And like everything that's happened in the universe has led us to this point in time. So why question it? Ned Kelly is a good example. Yes, he is. Very strong sentiment of anti-establishment behavior coming from the Ned Kelly legend. Like that is a great example. Ned Kelly is like, for those who are not Australian, good morning and afternoon and evening to all. That is very respectful of you. For our international audience, good to see you, Reality Pixel. Yeah, the Ned Kelly is our Robin Hood story here in Australia. And so like, you know, standing up to the man and the system. I'm not sure so much about like the robbing of the rich and giving to the poor ethos exactly, but it was definitely the poor standing up for themselves. And like, you know, fighting against the machine. National legend and like a symbol of rebellion in Australia. Very potent symbol of rebellion, which is unfortunately, I would say, co-opted by reactionary politics usually, because like it comes with the national mythology unfortunately in this era, and the Americans would be able to tell us well about this. National mythology is definitely interwoven into right-wing kind of politics and their identity. The fish crawling out of sea was getting dry shells to butter with other fish. That's pretty good. That's the origin of exchange. Actually, it's animals who helped set up the barter system, which led to the development of currency, which led to capitalism, really, in its highest stage as we have today. That's pretty good. Don't tell David Graeber that. Yeah, well, Graeber's all wrong. Obviously, it was fish, barter fish, as we will call them, the great legacy of capitalism. So yeah, today we are going to kind of unpack an idea that we got to kind of at the end of last stream, which is something that me and Brandon Ox have actually been talking about, I guess now for a week or so, which is like the idea of the development of the forces of production, so the technology that kind of, and the scientific understanding and the general social knowledge that comes together at any point in history to help produce the value that we all live off as a society, and the extras too. It's not just, I guess, the subsistence stuff. What does Marx refer to it as? Like the consumption fund. Not just that, but like all the luxuries, everything that is produced under this mode of production, specifically being, you know, the mode of production based on capitalism. The productive forces under capitalism are developed at an absolute revolutionary rate. It's one of the characteristic features of capitalism that it's just able to kind of trailblaze the productive forces continually, unlike feudalism, unlike slavery and stuff like that, where they didn't really develop the forces of production because they weren't interested in that. Like in capitalism, like capitalists will develop the means of production, the forces of production in competition with one another, and very interestingly, to eradicate the need for labor, because labor is a variable cost. It goes up and down. It's unpredictable. It fights back. Like, who wants, like, a machine won't fight back, that's for sure. It won't talk back either. But like, labor is a dangerous cost for capital. So like, if you can develop machinery that replaces the need for labor and like get rid of labor altogether, you are all the better off as a capitalist and a capitalist class, because you're disempowering labor. It's really the only class that stands against the capitalist class, because it has power in that relationship. And so capitalism is self-defeating, because, you know what? Labor is actually the magical element that helps produce surplus value for the entire system, not just the individual capitalist. So if you take labor out of the equation, technically the mode of production based on capital, you know, ceases to have any meaning. Its whole point is like the control of surplus labor, and like surplus labor in this system is continually increased, and like increased to an extent that the necessary element of labor, so the part that laborers need to work to have their own subsistence, to cover their own wages and their own needs and stuff like that, that's dramatically decreased, because like you can have, you know, one worker doing what 1,000 workers used to do. So like, you really just don't need laborers anymore. And if you don't need laborers, then you're just removing that basis, the actual material basis for profit, not the accounting tricks and the financialization that we have today, but the real basis for profit. You're getting rid of that basis altogether by eradicating the working class. And so capitalism is technically self-defeating by this measure. By this measure. It's a very important concept. And Brandon Knox pointed out last week, quite aptly, this is associated with the idea of the falling rate of profit, because as you know, labor is eradicated from the process, the rate of profit falls. And so like this would insinuate and be a case for why capitalism is self-defeating. And like, you know, basically it's going to revolutionize itself, man, because it makes itself redundant. But the point of today's stream, is that really true? Is that really true? I will put that question to you, the group. Is capitalism self-defeating based on the idea of the falling rate of profit? Tell me your answers in the comments. I want to know. The earliest form of exchange being the trade of resource. If you get rid of money, that's restored and a new economic system is established, allowing a new form of capitalism to be made. The earliest form of exchange being the trade of resources. If you get rid of money, that's restored and a new economic system is established, allowing a new form of capitalism to be made. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like a lot of people would put their faith and their money, figuratively, in like kind of this new kind of, it's not really new, but like the cryptocurrency kind of phenomenon that is happening at the moment. The digitization, the complete digitization of currency. So the, what like the Chinese are doing with their e-currencies, and like kind of the end of like private banking consortiums and like having things done all on an electronic or a digitized platform. So like, you know, changing the mode of exchange through its medium would have a revolutionary effect on capitalism itself. It's an interesting point. Deep ones exchanging seashells amongst themselves. Yeah, so if you've thought about it, it's obviously still being digested, because everybody has withheld from commenting and putting their bets on in the comment section. So like obviously everyone is fully contemplating this and can't be distracted right now. That empire failed because they were all shellfish. Call of the Kabaterlu. Yeah, so obviously everyone's still processing the question that I had asked the chat, but like I would posit to you that there are elements, let's say fail safes within capitalism, other tendencies within capitalism that that would stop the productive forces themselves being kind of this element that just means that capitalism will end itself. Okay, there are other things, other factors in the totality of capital that will stop the falling rate of profit, or the tendency for the rate of profit to be the death knell of capitalism, to be the thing that kind of ends it at the end of the day. The falling rate of profit is not enough alone to bring capitalism to its knees. And I will turn to the godfather of this stream, who he will be affectionately known with this title from now on. You got censored. Well, you know what? It's official. Ask the other people that are in this stream, because they get censored all the time. So here's to you. Congratulations. You've finally been censored. That's like kind of a rite of passage. If you actually want to be on this stream, you actually have to get censored at some time. We've been shut down. Like I've been shut down a few times live. YouTube has cut us off midstream. How atrocious. So like, yeah, technically you're in now. You've been censored. Congratulations. I'm not sure if capitalism is self-defeating. We all get censored here. Welcome to the team. Yeah, it's pretty much, it's a rite of passage. So congratulations. You can go get a tattoo now. And like you're part of the crew. China bad. Man, that was stupid. They cut your streams off. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that one. You know, the powers that be at Google thought that was necessary. Apparently, we're just a dangerous motley crew here. Now, the godfather of this stream, as he will affectionately be known, is none other than David Harvey. And so he's going to shed some light for us. I know how absolutely invigorated everyone gets by listening to David Harvey speak, but like the man drops some truth bombs. Let me tell you that much for free. If you want any more, I will charge you. But like he just analyzes things with a level of sophistication and zero emotion that I find very kind of cleansing. Is he Santa? Well, he is our version of Santa. He delivers the goodies, and on a regular basis too. So yes, this is climate change censored? Is that what you got censored on? On mentoring climate change? Oh, you badass. All right. Welcome to the stream, my friend. Yeah, I think so. Well, Kenoth got censored for saying that what is it, communism kills 100 million people, which is like pretty common discourse on social media. Like the amount of times I've seen people write communism equals 100 million deaths or something like that, like just as a mainstay, like as a copy and paste job. And like it gets censored on this stream. So as somebody suggested to me already, now I have demasked. I'm probably being tracked by the AFP. I get censored all the time. There you go. See, there it is. It's a rite of passage. Welcome, Kenneth. I hope the beach day was good the other day. You get censored for saying Marxist Santa, and yeah, just use stars and hashes and all that sort of stuff, or say China with a Y. That'll help you. So yeah, we're going to listen to David Harvey, okay, because he's going to talk about like this idea of the falling rate of profit, maybe not being like kind of this thing that's going to end capitalism as we know it. And we're going to unpack that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about something interesting, which is the beach was awesome. Good. I am not jealous at all. So I'm glad you had a good time. Yeah, and then we're going to talk about accelerationism. So, like, I don't know if anyone's is familiar with the work of Nick Land. Capitalism isn't self-defeating due to climate change. That's it. That's the controversial thing that you wanted to say. Damn, it's badass. Yeah, I know. Talk about controversial. Calm down, Brandon Knox. We're gonna have to ban you from this stream. uh, um, yeah. And we're going to talk about accelerationism, which is like an offshoot of, I think, the idea of the falling rate of profit. The idea that like technology is a force in and of itself, and kind of it should be pumped. We should pump as much development and R&D and love into the productive forces as we can, at the expense of everything else, including humanity, by the way, because like that's the natural progression of things under this mode of production, and then that will be a liberating force for humanity. And when I say liberating, I mean the ultimate form of liberation. Like that'll basically let us go from our own existence. But like that's a natural. I don't know if it's a natural progression, but that is a progression of the idea of the falling rate of profit. So the idea that technology could just wipe out the need for human labor. And then what happens is society post human labor? Well, do you need humans at all? And so we're going to look at accelerationism too, because I think it's interesting, and it stems off into this idea of the dark enlightenment. So like, we're going into some dark territory today. So we may get censored. Anyway, and kicked out of the stream. So like, strap yourselves in. It's going to be an interesting one, I'm sure. But like, let's start with some nerdy stuff. Okay. So chomping at the bit. I know, everyone calm down. We're going to start with some nerdy stuff and take it from there. We already are. Uh-oh. All right, here we go.
Technological structures and technological innovations that Marx is talking about. But the fact is that has never been the case. That up until now, there are many sectors which produce a lot of value, which are labor intensive, and where these sophisticated structures are really have, as yet, and there's always that caveat, as yet not being deployed. Now, just to give you a concrete example of this, the largest employers of labor back in around 1970 were General Motors, Ford, and US Steel. Now, okay, so they're the biggest employers, some of the biggest employers of labor. The biggest employers of labor in our time are McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the franchise of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Walmart. Now, Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, what are they making? They're making hamburgers, and they're making hamburgers in a rather labor-intensive way. So they're very labor-intensive systems, forms of production. And that, generally speaking, then kind of says there's been a huge increase in many parts of the world, including in the United States, of restaurants and restaurant labor. There are now 15 million, I think, people employed in restaurants. But it's labor intensive, very labor intensive. And
okay, so what he's talking about here, he's setting up this idea that, like, as we were speaking about before, you can develop the productive forces, the technology, your scientific understanding. And like, in the 1970s, before neoliberalism, seems to be an important time, in America, let's use that example. In America, you had like a majority of the working class, the laboring population, employed in car manufacturing for like Ford, or like, employed by General Motors. So like, industrial production, like classic capitalism, industrial production. And then like, 50 years later, like kind of thing, we've got what? We've got a majority or a large section of the working class that are no longer in, car manufacturing, because they shipped all of that off. to China, because that was the hardcore organized section of the working class that was getting real wins on the board for a large majority of the population. That gets gutted out, deindustrialized, shipped overseas, and like now, who's producing the surplus value that feeds back into this system at this localized level in America, not just generally across the globe, but like it does feed back into the greater totality of capitalism? You have a large section of the working population who are involved in production. It's not cars, but it's food production, and like it's labor intensive. So there's a lot of surplus value to be gained there. If you know you're paying a McDonald's employee like $10 an hour, and like they're producing, you know, like $100 worth of food, kind of like, I don't know, a day at least, and you pay them $50, like you're reaping 50% of their time as surplus value that you can turn into actual profit, like a material basis for profit. And like we're talking about employing 15 million workers in America. And that's not including the people that work at, you know, your Walmarts and stuff like that. And so like they are producing value. So you just basically, if one element of your society starts to develop the productive forces so heavily that like, you know, you don't need labor anymore, then another sector in society will step up to the table and start employing labor to reap surplus value from. And so this is what he's talking about here, is the dichotomy between, okay, deindustrialize heavy industry, car manufacturers and the like, send it somewhere else. But like the laborers in America that are going to produce surplus value on that as part of the North American continent, they will start laboring in other sectors. Surplus value can be derived and concentrated in labor-intensive uses that doesn't need, you know, like complicated machinery to gain your surplus value. So while there is a fall in the rate of profit thanks to the increased levels of technological prowess and machinery, that doesn't just mean that we're just like moving constantly towards like every piece of technology developing and making like labor redundant. No, surplus value will come from other sectors of the economy, and it will equalize. It will compensate for the lack of surplus value that is now coming out of car manufacturing, because that's being done by machines. Or when AI really starts to take a hold and starts like just chopping people out of certain industries, and they like no longer need like, you know, mass workforces to do all the administrative tasks and all the organizational things that people used to do, then that mass of workers will move to another sector, and another sector will open up where it is dependent on people for labor, and so it can extract a lot more surplus value out of them relatively, and then labor, like then like capitalism can continue. So like what we also spoke about last week is this idea that capitalism is an engine, is a force in the universe that is localized here on planet Earth, but like not so localized now, because like we're starting to branch off into the exploitation of space by human capital. But like capitalism is a force that wants to reproduce itself. It wants to stay alive. It wants to keep on going. And so like the equalization of the rate of profit is a counterbalancing phenomenon to the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So the tendency of capitalism to make labor redundant, there's a tendency inbuilt within capitalism to keep itself alive and to keep itself going, to like kind of transfer the labor around, and like other industries will open up that are labor intensive. This has happened as well with tourism since the 1970s, like basically where like flight was kind of pretty rare, and like people would dress up, you know, wear a suit because they were going to get on a plane, like it was part of the experience. Now flying is like, you know, whatever, like kind of thing, I have to catch a plane. Like, you know, tourism and like the tourism industry, cultural capitalism, the experience of selling experiences as a commodity, that has hugely increased since the 70s. And subsumed huge sections of the working class, and they produce surplus value for capitalists who make money through the tourism industry, and that is done across the world. And so, like, he would argue, and he has argued, I've heard it many times in the past, that, like, you know, tourism kind of compensates for, I guess, the automation of the industrial sector of the economy. This is all part of that grand theory that we were talking about last week, that, like, capitalism is conscious. It's like a force. It's dialectical. So it's a force, and it's in motion, and it wants to stay in motion. And it will find avenues in order to do that. It's a very interesting concept. Probably a good time to start making rules to protect all life. Yeah, in the sense of, like, kind of this idea that, like, we're going to have technological revolutions that are just going to change the game forever. Look at the techno-feudalism. Yeah, it'd be a great time to start talking about, like, real human rights again. China does hand gesture. Yeah, it's just much more profitable nowadays for capitalists to own fast food chains. And you can use machines for making cars to a degree. Yeah, it makes sense, right? And, like, why would you invest in, like, heavy machinery and, like, heavy tech advancements in, like, burger making? It's probably cheaper just to employ and exploit labor to do that. Like, capital does make a decision just because the technology is there, and, like, they probably could make, like, McDonald's completely automated. Like, is it profitable to do so? Is it profitable for the entire capital machine? And if it's not profitable for the capitalist class as a unity, consciously or unconsciously, due to the equalization of the rate of profit, like, maybe they won't do it. They won't do it because it'll destroy capital from within. It's too big of a change. And so people go into minimum wage jobs at fast food chains. Got to give it to the capitalists. They're always, for the most part, been ruthless as fuck. Yes. Speaks Tim Curry. Space. If the economy was an organism, that would be capitalism there. What would capitalism be there? You have to put that question to me again. Obvious. What would it be as an organism? Okay, the obvious would be a virus. But there's nuance to be had with that analogy. Yeah, because viruses, actually, it's not a bad analogy, because viruses don't exactly want to kill their host, because that's a bad virus, like a bad virus. Like, they do want to survive in their own ecosystems and stuff like that. Kidney stones. The obvious symbolism would be lore. Who is this handsome man? Where is MysterE? MysterE is retired. As you can see, welcome to the stream. If you're wondering why we're talking about, we're talking about whether or not revolution is inevitable, in the sense that capitalism is inherently self-defeating because it seeks all of its value from labor. That's how it extracts surplus value. It controls the laboring class to get a hold of surplus labor. But as it develops technology and makes laborers and labor, surplus value, surplus labor, redundant, is it self-defeating? And, like, while that is a natural tendency, there are counter tendencies within capitalism that kind of ameliorate that. And I would say ameliorate that to a certain degree, and, like, can't be ameliorated forever. But there's plenty of sectors in its arsenal, I'm assuming, and plenty of new markets and commodities that can be produced to allow it to constantly find a way to extract as much surplus value from labor to continue its profits. The law, that is what we are speaking about. If you were looking for the quick rundown. Probably a plague. Yes, well, as long as the plague is continuing its own existence and, like, you know, really trying to maintain itself, then yes, a plague is probably a good one. I mean, rights for all the animals and plants, because we will eventually be classed as a lesser life form. Yes. And, like, especially if you consider stuff like, you know, the natural development of, like, the forces of production, right? Like what we're sitting through now in the age of AI, and, like, a completely digitized world, like the potentiality for techno-feudalism, as Yanis Varoufakis would call it, like, you know, we're all just going to be like a real subordinate class, like an unnecessary, a superfluous class. Like labor is still powerful in capitalism because, like, you know, it produces the value. They got to control it, but like it produces value, it has power. But like, you know, if we really end up being made redundant, like humans, that is, in terms of producing value, and there's still a ruling class, there's no system that like kind of decides to destroy the idea of class relations, like of one person or group dominating another. If there's no ideology out there that wants to destroy class relations, and we still have a class society but no need for laborers, like we are fucked as a human race. And so, like, you know, yeah, we want to have some type of rights in any society because we'll be classed as a lesser life form, because like people still need plants and animals and stuff, right? They want to enjoy nature. Depends on whether or not an extraterrestrial empire enslaves us in the future. A lot to bank on there, Ollie Atlas. Not gonna lie, a lot to bank on. But you know, we can always hope for an alien invasion to save us from capital. An anteater. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. I saw this meme of like this ant, a leaf cutter ant, like carrying this leaf, and like this chicken's just watching it, and then like just grabs the leaf off the ant and eats it. And so like it makes me think of that meme. That's like what capitalists do. They let the ants do all the work, and then they just eat the leaves that they're trying to take back to their home. Let the lizards reign supreme. Jerry Poppins. Well. Welcome to the stream, sir. Let the lizards reign supreme. Yes, we're all down with these wild conspiracy theories, and I think, you know, we should show some respect to our reptilian overlords. Maybe we just wait, Ollie Atlas. Maybe we were that alien empire on the last, and we have just forgotten. Now, this is interesting that people are talking about like aliens and stuff like that, because like we're going to get into accelerationism, as I was saying before, which is like this idea of the development of capitalism, and capitalism just pushing technology, and technology is just going to change everything for the human race, kind of thing. And so like we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Hold this alien conspiracy theory stuff. We're going to get there. Can we have an automated class society? Wouldn't the contradictions be too strong as soon as we get there, so the revolution become just common sense? Can we have an automated class? An automated class society? Can you give me more in terms of what you mean by an automated class society? As in, like, if we got to a point where everything was fully automated, wouldn't it just make sense? Like the revolution, like to a classless society, wouldn't make sense? I would say it would. Based on the development of AI. That has been my argument in the podcast that me and 4AS do and stuff like that. Like, I have argued heavily for the idea that, like, in an AI environment where you have AI able to kind of not only take over most of the laboring, because there's certain things that like humans just will do naturally and they'll want other humans to do, but like a majority of it, and like decision making and like management of resources, then like you could just have a situation where it just makes sense to kind of trickle over into a classless society. However, from my understanding of history and revolutions, from studying them, is that like the ruling class, it doesn't matter how immediate something is, it doesn't matter how like sensical something is, like, you know, letting go of power kind of thing, because it's just stupid. Like, they're not going to let go of it unless they're forced to do so. And so, like, you know, classic example would be like the aristocracy and like nobility, or like the monarchs of like 150 years ago. Like, look at England today. Like, you know, it really doesn't make sense to have a monarch. Like, they're literally just like a figurehead that does fucking nothing, but like, you know, kind of adds a little bit of a cultural element to English and British society, but it's still there, and like they haven't relinquished power, they haven't tried to give it up. or anything like that. And so like you have these relics from the past, like people, like classes that do hold power, and like even if their basis is gone, so the basis of their power, like controlling labor or something like that, is just nonsensical because it doesn't exist anymore. They will still hold power, and they will hold it, and they get more and more violent and ruthless, like as they want to cling and hold on to power more and more. And so like if you had a bunch of, you know, like an Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos types that like hold the keys to the means of production, so all of the AI out there, I don't think they're just going to be like, oh, well, we've made labor redundant. No one needs to work anymore. Ooh, plug. Thank you. Thanks, Jack. I don't think that, like, you know, the tech bros are just going to be like, all right, everyone can have AI now. They're going to want to control that and hold on to it because it's their source of power. And like, you know, it's a motivating force in and of itself. It's not just profit for these people. Like it is about total control. And like, why would you give up the keys? Like, if you had the keys to, I don't know, all the wealth in society or something like that, and controlling the entirety of the population in your hands, why would like Jeff Bezos give that up? Like kind of thing. Why would Zuckerberg give that up? Like, you know, obviously, you know, they enjoy that level of power because if they didn't, they wouldn't be controlling their organizations like they do currently. And so like I don't think it, like, just because it makes sense for the rest of us, it's going to make sense for some all-powerful section of a ruling class somewhere. But I would say that if that comes about, though, law, and we have the ability, because the technology is developed to such an extent, it wouldn't be a big stretch for there to be a large-scale kind of revolt or revolution or like a popular uprising where you just displace these people and take it in the name of the people kind of thing. So like, you know, developing the technology is a good idea because like the closer we get to making labor redundant and moving towards the basis, the foundation of a classless society, if they do all the hard work, capital does all of the heavy lifting in that sense, then like we just need to be able to step into the driver's seat at some point. And like I think we could do that democratically as a dictatorship of the proletariat or something like that much better if it was fully developed and advanced, then you're kind of just like making it up as we go along. That's why DeepSeek was so shocking for the market. Yes. And like DeepSeek is interesting because it highlights the fact that like the productive forces in AI in Silicon Valley, they absolutely had no way to properly value those productive forces because there was no competition. There was nothing else to measure it against. And so they really overinflated its value, and its value is based on everyone's egos in Silicon Valley. And they thought they were just so far ahead of the game and they were just killing the Chinese. They were ahead by, 2 or 3 years, kind of thing. And it's just like, oh, well, whatever. Don't worry about China. Don't worry about anyone else. Like Silicon Valley's killing it. And then lo and behold, DeepSeek comes out and like, what is it? $500 billion was wiped out of the stock market in relation to AI technologies and associated technologies in like a day. And so they're just overinflated. They just have no idea how to value their own productive forces, the bourgeoisie in Silicon Valley, which is very, very interesting. Hey, Kareem is our resident AI explorer and expert, Australia's #1 AI explorer, Kareem. OpenAI didn't care that they stole everyone's intellectual property to feed their AI and then got upset when DeepSeek made it better. It was a huge blow to American exceptionalism too. Yeah, there's the ego part, right? They would really like, hey, we're killing it. We're #1, a few years in advance, and then bang. And nothing feels as strong to the capitalist class as a hit to the stock market, that's for sure. Because that's where they all vicariously live these days. They don't have their money in anything real, or not a large portion of it anyway. But yes, OpenAI, and that's like a real capitalist thing. Like, their costs are borne by society, a lot of their costs, like, intellectual property, right? Like the general knowledge base that's out there, they just let their systems at OpenAI just consume every piece of literature and writing that could exist to build up these massive, massive databases to feed their architecture. And then like, people have tried to sue them as well, and like I don't know if it's ever been successful, but like yeah, they've completely benefited off social wealth, social intelligence, and just like, and then yeah, had the audacity to turn around and accuse DeepSeek for cutting corners and not playing the game right. It's funny watching the AI bourgeoisie kind of scramble at the moment. Um, it's a real area of the laws of coercive competition as Marx would define them. So I'm just going to go back to this, and we'll see what else he has to say about like this idea of a counteractive force to like the productive force is just being these things that's going to liberate us all.
Yeah, there's an equalization of the rate of profit which goes on between the capital intensive sectors like General Motors and the restaurant sector. One of the things we're seeing right now is
He's saying right now because when this was filmed, they were in the middle of a lockdown during COVID.
Huge impact on the global economy because many of those labor intensive sectors are caught up with what might be called hospitality industry or tourism, and in fact, the whole labor structure of contemporary capital has been to patronize and to develop these labor intensive spheres of production, which are foundational in terms of value production. So in effect, the sort of process that Marx is talking about here has only affected certain sectors of the economy. And to the degree that it's affected certain sectors of the economy, those sectors have indeed reduced their labor input very classically. But what Marx talks about is that under conditions of the equalization of the rate of profit, the restaurant sector will be actually transferring a lot of the value it creates and surplus value that it creates to the capital intensive industries. In other words, what Marx is talking about in terms of mobilization of science and technology and forms that are adequate to capital, don't remember that fixed capital is only an adequate form of capital from a certain perspective.
See, don't forget. I think that's what he means there. But like, this is really important to understand that like, just because we see like, this AI revolution happening right now and like AI is going to change the world and like, it's going to displace all of this labor and like it'll be the end of labor and working as we know it, and we're going to move to some new society or something like that and live amongst the stars. Like just hold back. Like if labor gets cut out of the process over here, don't be surprised that like capital has a way to survive and make sure that it extracts surplus labor somewhere else. It's not going to just kill itself in the name of advancing the productive forces. And he brings up this idea because Marx talks a lot about this in the Grundrisse. He uses this term or this like line of speaking which says what is adequate to capital. So like something that is adequate to capital at any point of its history along its trajectory to help it survive, to help it keep going, to help it reproduce itself. So at this point, it might be really necessary for capital to kind of, again, develop the means of production, develop the productive forces through AI and displace huge sections of labor because like maybe that section of the workforce is no longer profitable for capital anymore, and it could be more profitable for it just to replace all of those people with machines and get rid of like people that are kind of administrative roles and managerial roles and like all of the sort of stuff that AI seeks to displace. Maybe those sections of the economy are no longer profitable to capital anymore. And like, it'll find a way to still extract surplus value from labor some other way. And like, this is a classic, you can classically see this in neoliberalism because like, when they offshored the industrial sector from Britain and from the US and stuff like that, like the exact same stuff Like they still needed laborers to do all of this industrial production. They just took it to like Southeast Asia or Northeast Asia, and were like, yeah, do it there, and like just do it to an easily exploited labor class. And so like they didn't get rid of the idea of labor at all. Actually, they didn't replace labor with machines really at all and advance the productive forces. They did over time, but first it was really just about getting cheap labor to do the exact same thing, just at like an absolute fraction of the cost that it did in the Western world. And so they were still actually extracting like more surplus value off labor in like the East Asian countries than they could have ever hoped for in the West. They just transported that somewhere else and continued to exploit labor. This is completely unrelated, but have you seen Vinland Saga? It's super good. It's an anime that has themes around slavery, like people being property, war hierarchy. I think you would like it, MysterE. I have not. But like I might write that one down. Wings of Cheese. What's it called? Vinland. I'll look it up. I'm not much of a popular culture digester. I just don't have time. I'm just researching stuff all the time and making content, but good to know. When I watched it, I was reminded of historical materialism. It was very thought-provoking. Couldn't another form of colonialism be the path the capital would take? Yes, yes. And like people would describe like what neoliberalism does in terms of like, going in and like attacking developing countries and third world countries, trapping places in debt, like through the IMF or something like that. And then allowing like foreign capital to come in and kind of exploit labor forces, privatize assets, and lay claim to natural resources as a form of neo-colonialism. And so like it produces a lot of value that way by just like kind of forcing the door open through diplomacy and like debt peonage and reproducing itself that way. So it's not a bad point. Colonialism. I think colonialism is a tendency of capitalism. It's go to an undeveloped world, like a part of the world that, or a marketplace that is completely undeveloped through the forces of production. Like it doesn't have the technology because it doesn't have the wealth to produce that technology. So it doesn't have its own national sovereignty. It doesn't have its own national sovereign wealth fund to develop its own forces of production. And so you can go over there and like use its labor, use its markets, and set up your own with foreign capital. And that's how you can make your capital go around. I'll leave that rest of the chat there because it seems like people are discussing anime. Some might even say imperialism is the higher. Yes. Okay. So imperialism, yeah, being in the Leninist sense, the highest stage of capitalism. So like the idea that like it's not even nations anymore that really go around dominating the globe. It's corporations, and they kind of control and cannibalize their competition and go around the world really controlling policy and stuff like that. And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Lenin on that one. But like he was calling this out like what, over 100 years ago. So like, what would be imperialism today in the neoliberal era? Imperialism in that sense on steroids, like absolute steroids, especially in the age of the internet, where you can literally send an email and on one side of the planet and it instantaneously get to the other side of the planet. Like think of what imperialism could do in the Leninist sense. Imperialism could do with that type of telecommunications infrastructure, because like capitalism is founded on like good infrastructure, and telecommunications to be able to communicate effectively and quickly speeds up capitalism to an incredibly unbelievable sense. especially if you were looking at it 100 years ago, you wouldn't be able to conceive how quick capital could move around the globe until you have instantaneous communication infrastructure.
The other perspective would say, if you really want capital to continue and the class relation to continue, then you've got to actually cultivate circulating capital. And circulating capital is not necessarily going to be so impressed by all of these technological innovations. So my point here is to say that, Marx tells a story, a narrative, and it's a pretty interesting narrative, and I think a compelling one in lots of ways. But what he doesn't do is to
actually... What he's talking about here, Brandon Knox, especially, like as we've been discussing, like the rising, the rate of the profit, the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and because of the means of production increasing and like revolutionizing society. He's saying that he's basically saying this is a nice story that Marx is telling, but it's not the whole story. And so, like, we should just check Marx on that. You don't hear a lot of Marxists talk about that. You don't hear a lot of people, like, you hear, like, anti-commies saying that all the time. Oh, did you know that Marx was poor and he had an affair or something like that? And you're just like, what the hell's got to do with his theory? But, like, he's checking Marx's kind of narrative that is like, hey, if you develop the productive forces, capitalism will kill itself.
Actually spell out what the assumptions are. And this then comes back to the nature of Grundrisse as a text. It's not a completed text. Marx doesn't lay out exactly what all of his assumptions are in setting up this narrative, but he sees in this narrative that there's something going on in terms of the dynamics of capital and in terms of the history of capital. In other words, you could take this argument he has about the necessity of the mobilization of science and technology, the necessity of the further construction of fixed capital formation, all those kinds of things. And you could kind of say, well, actually, this is a very good narrative. And it's a very good narrative to work with. At the same time as we should approach it critically by saying, look, this is not the whole story by any means. There is another story being told in which we can see within that bigger story elements of what Marx is talking about here actually happening. And therefore, one of the things that Marx is giving us is an indication of what it is that's, quote, adequate to capital. And that is the phrase that sticks with me. What is adequate to capital? Here,
what helps capital reproduce itself? And like, while it will develop the means of production, it will develop its productive forces to a point where we could say, like, that entire industry, like how we make a car today, is fully automated. And so, like, maybe we're at a point where we don't need capitalism anymore and it's going to eat itself because it gets rid of laborers. But like, no. Like, just because like one commodity in the endless sea of commodities under capitalism is now like almost fully automated and you don't need labor, that doesn't mean that capitalism or capital as a mode of production is done. It's not done. It'll find another way to make sure that it can extract labor off controlling a laboring population. And so that is like, it's good and it's bad, like, because you can let capitalism kind of just develop to a certain point where it can really allow us to just transition easily or more easily or nicely into a post-capitalist world, because like the technology has been developed so well. But like what I like about what he's saying is he is confirming the notion that a revolution is not inevitable and it won't happen by itself. It will need some social consciousness to it. It will need people just to be like, all right, we're done with capitalism now. I know it could keep on going on forever, finding new markets to keep extracting surplus value from labor, but we don't need it anymore because it's automated how to make cars, it's automated how to grow food, it's automated how to make housing. These are all the essentials that humans need. We'll take that off the market, thank you. We'll take your technology and like we'll continue with a new form of society without being driven by the force of capital. But like, that has to be a conscious effort by us. And that's why we are all revolutionaries in this stream. That's why we're all here, because we have an understanding that there is a revolutionary necessity, a social revolutionary necessity to the idea of the mode of production. It's not going to kick itself because it wants to survive. And like, it is us conscious effort from people like us that will stop it from just kicking along and surviving. Because, you know, at a certain point, like everything reaches a peak and like trails off. And so like, has capitalism reached its peak, and is it like slowly dying? And is it just being kept on life support because it finds new markets and stuff like that? That's hard to make the call while you're in the middle of it. But like, you know, you could argue that it has reached its peak, and like now it's holding us back as a species, and it's time to revolutionize it. Like, do we kill it now? Do we wait until it's retired? Do we wait until it's old and senile? And then like, you know, take it around the back for a like kind of thing. Like, do we do that now? Is it premature to do it now? Like, you know, as revolutionaries, I think we could make that call ourselves. Well, we have a different form of colonialism in Israel. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Do we? Do we ever? And we will get to that, actually. So it mightn't be a nice time for a break from the theory, and we're going to do something a little bit lighter. We've got a new segment on the stream now, and the new segment is called Propaganda Watch, and this has been delivered to us by none other than the Wings of Cheese. And so we're going to go and do something a little bit like, it's not really lighthearted, but like it'll be lighthearted in the sense that we get to analyze not only some propaganda by the reactionary side of the equation, but also their response to reactionary propaganda. We're going to analyze our adversaries. Okay, so the opposite to a revolutionary is a reactionary, and we're going to go look at some reactionary propaganda now as a little side note, a little additional segment, just to kind of have a break from the hardcore theory. And yeah, like I said, we're going to go see how reactionary people think about stuff. So here is like I said, a piece of content that has been graciously provided to us by none other than the Wings of Cheese. And like, let's just see how reactionary thought plays out. And then, like I said, we're gonna look at reactionary comments. And like, this is obviously real rage bait and like trigger issue for like reactionaries and stuff like that. Queers for Palestine receive a reality check following social media post. Like, you would know, if you know my content well enough, I don't go there when it comes to Palestine. I haven't commented on it, and I refuse to. But like, you know, I think it's pretty obvious where my standing would be in the whole Palestine-Israel issue. But like, this is just a way for them just to mock anyone who is pro-Palestinian liberation by pointing out the obvious irony and contradiction in like queers supporting an ethno group which is Muslim and obviously is very anti-queer for the most part. So like, they're gonna be absolutely scathing and critical Sky News, I'm sure. And they're going to show us how silly the idea of Queers for Palestine is in a completely objective fashion. And like, we're all going to learn a lot from it. So like, you know, strap yourself in. Let's see how these guys go, the old Sky News team. Let's see what they got, shall we?
Well, they got a little reality. But first, Queers for Palestine. Well, they got a little reality check today. Our ambassador in Iran was given a dressing down for an Instagram post promoting homosexuality. You see, homosexuality is illegal in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And by illegal, I mean the Islamists will hang you by the neck for it. And that might be considered lenient. In other parts of the Muslim world, they'll stone you to death or throw you off a building for being gay. As a side note, the gay community in Israel enjoy rights not even afforded in many Western nations. But let's not allow facts to get in the way of contempt for Israel. Perhaps our ambassador...
Here's the measure, okay? So Israel is good because it allows people to be gay and to be queer. There's queer rights in Israel, so Israel's okay. So that's the measure for the reactionary sentiment and cause right here. Is just like, hey, I know we're always conservative and we're all for family values and we like to divide people over the issue of queerness or being gay or whatever. But like, hey, when it suits us, Israel good because Israel has queer and gay rights. Remember that one. They're all for supporting a country and measuring it on how sane it is by how good its rights are for queer people. This guy looks like Koshi from Sunrise. If he got smacked in the head with a cricket bat, yeah, and forgot to like shave or something like that. He basically did a more wordy version of facts don't care about your feelings. Yeah, pretty much, right? I thought he was going to say facts get in the way of a good story. In the Palestine war, there are two authoritarian groups oppressing the region, Israel and Hamas. Yeah, well, and like Hamas has been, the wedge, like the way to get in, into Palestine. It's not really about Palestine, it's about Hamas.
In Iran, Ian McConville had been drinking the Quiz for Palestine Kool-Aid. A photo of McConville wearing purple and sharing purple cupcakes was posted on the official Australia in Iran Instagram account in support of Wear It Purple Day. Now, Wear It Purple Day is an annual LGBTQIA+ awareness day to celebrate and promote all things queer. Who knew that was a thing in Iran? I suppose you've got to trust our diplomats to know their audience. The Instagram post was helpfully captioned in Persian so the locals could read it. It read, "Celebrating Wear It Purple Day with a splash of purple in every corner and some delicious cupcakes made with love. Today and every day we're dedicated to creating a supportive environment where everyone, especially LGBTQIA+ youth, can feel proud to be themselves. Let's keep championing diversity and inclusion for a brighter, more inclusive future." Now, obviously, the post, which naturally included a pride flag flown at so many pro-Palestinian rallies around our country, was liked by about 3,000 people. But here's a surprise, and I'm sure a surprise for Quiz for Palestine. The Ayatollah was not one of those liking this particular post. Does the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran not like cupcakes?
How do they know it? How do they know he didn't like it?
Maybe purple's just not his colour. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs strongly condemned our embassy for promoting homosexuality, which it described as abnormal conduct. According to Iranian news agencies, our officials were told the content published by the Australian embassy is insulting and contrary to Iranian and Islamic tradition, customs and culture. Well, this news will surely come as an enormous shock to all those protesters we see on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne, madly waving their rainbow flags alongside Palestinian flags as if they were natural bedfellows. It seems gay rights and Palestinian rights are linked, but only in the fertile imaginations of those who enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. Now, this, of course, raises an awkward question for the LGBTQ community in this country. How do they reconcile their support for Iran's proxy, Hamas, with Iran's anti-gay laws? Iran is happy to accept the support of gay activists on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne, but won't accept even a gay cupcake on the streets of Tehran. Now, this should give
not the gay cupcakes.
Something to ponder.
I'll take a gay cupcake, please. Anybody feel like a gay cupcake? This is actually pretty funny. Like, I know he's trying to be serious, this guy, but like, this is pretty funny. All right, continue.
I'm looking forward to seeing all those university students on campus tomorrow protesting the homophobic Iranian government. We'll wait. Meanwhile, Federal Government Minister Murray Watt told the ABC he was upset by the
See the story there? Let's just go back a second.
Tomorrow protesting the homophobic Iranian government. We'll wait.
So, you see, this is the thing. You can't protest an issue that has overlapping concerns somewhere else because it's contradictory. So, like, if you're trying to support Palestine, but then the Iranian government bans homophobia, is homophobic and bans gay activity, like, punishable by death, then like that contradiction cannot be overcome. And so instead of protesting for Palestinian rights against Israel, you should be protesting against homophobia in Iran or the Muslim world. And like how they're just using Iran and Palestine completely interchangeably here, like completely interchangeably, like they're almost the same place, which is, you know, a clever propagandistic tool. Why just like melding together like anyone who's in opposition to you as being the exact same thing. They're all kind of just mesh into one to make your point. It's a very interesting piece of propaganda because, like, you know, I'm assuming the general Sky News person wouldn't really give a shit what the difference is between Iran and Palestine. They're all the bloody same at the end of the day, let's be honest. I thought cupcake was just a synonym for gay. By their logic, they can't criticize China for police brutality in Hong Kong. There's a massive assumption that law always equals moral or enforces moral behavior. Their jokes are horrific. It's not much different with Fox. Well, you know, they're birthed from the same area, Ollie Atlas. They are from the same machine, propaganda machine.
Wait. Meanwhile, Federal Government Minister Murray Watt told the ABC he was upset by the Iranian reaction to our purple cupcakes.
I am concerned to see this reaction from the Iranian government to the activities of the Australian embassy. We're very proud about the fact that our embassies promote Australian values internationally, and I'm very concerned to see an overseas government seemingly take action against an Australian embassy that is upholding Australian values.
Too right, Mr. Watt. You learn a great deal about the values of a nation by listening closely to what comes out of their embassy. Speaking of which, it's exactly a month ago that our government summoned Iran's ambassador to Australia to explain his social media post calling not for Wear It Purple Day, but for Wipe Out Israel Day, cupcakes not included. Iran's ambassador wrote that wiping out the Zionist plague out of the Holy Lands of Palestine happens no later than 2027. Now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said at the time those comments were abhorrent, hateful, anti-Semitic, and had no place in Australia. Well, unless you're at one of those pro-Palestinian marches that happen every other weekend. But hang on a second. When the Iranian ambassador posted that Israel should be eliminated, wasn't that just Iran's embassy promoting Iranian values? We value tolerance. They value the wiping out of Israelis from the Middle East. It's called diversity. And yet the Albanese government continues to insist that Israel has to negotiate a ceasefire agreement with Hamas, which, as they know very well, is nothing but an extension of Iran, whose spokesman here openly touts for the elimination of Israel. I tell you what, support for a Hamas-controlled Palestine is a very queer thing indeed.
If it matters to
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. Oh my God. Seriously. Was that it? Did we get to the end of it? God, that was painful. Funny. But like, this is the problem with the contradictions in like identity politics struggles. Like they're really easily shot down in flames. Like he's just like, oh, well, you know, we're talking about like diversity. Let's be diverse then. Let's introduce all types of like thoughts and opinions into this mix. Why do we have to limit it to queer diversity and not Iranian diversity when it comes to eliminating the Zionists or something like that? Like, you know, it's very clever, isn't it? They're very clever, these people, that's for sure. Too clever for themselves. The heck, unfair. Look at those curls. I bet you have lovely long eyelashes as well. Good boys. Get all the luck. Nice eyelashes. Getting the P standing up in the woods. So, hello. Hello, Hyper Bumfuzzle. Welcome to the chat. If you're wondering what we're doing, we are analyzing reactionary propaganda to see how it is that they kind of develop and indoctrinate their audiences and their ideology. They instill their ideology in their reactionary leaning sections of the population. And it would very much seem that they are using identity politics as a wedge to try and point out the obvious, and they are obvious, contradictions in leftist identity politics. It's just like, well, you want to be diverse, like kind of thing. And then like, how like people can ideologically identify with Palestine as a queer person or someone who represents a queer movement. And then the obvious contradiction being that like Palestinians who are associated with the broader Muslim world are very homophobic and have laws in many nations which would call for basically the penalty of death for homosexual relations or anything considered queer, I guess. And so like they're able to like shoot holes in anyone's logic based on those stark contradictions, which is like not a very unique form of propaganda at all. Like just calling out your adversary for all the contradictions in their behavior, because you could sit down calling out the contradictions in Sky News and their audience for days as well. But like it does make for effective brainwashing, very effective brainwashing. Fortunately or unfortunately, how you want to look at it really depends on where you sit on the identity politics fence. Really, it really does. And that's the problem with identity politics. There's no real material basis that you can tie it to. And so like it's just where you sit on an issue. And so like you can be wrong today and you can be right tomorrow, or you can be vice versa, let's be honest. So yeah, welcome to the chat, Hyper Bumfuzzle. I don't know if you've actually been on the chat here before, but like welcome to the stream. Katia is here. Welcome. What products do you use? Speaking of your curls, my hair is always frizzy. My hair is very frizzy, but it's just this nice webcam here. It cuts out all the frizz. So no products, just love. Just love. I've never heard American right-wingers express so much sympathy for gays except the ones in Palestine. Yeah, it's interesting. And see, that's the real contradiction, right? And that's what I was pointing to earlier in the piece, is just like they're willing to stand there and like be all sacrosanct about like, oh, well, they don't really protect the rights of gays and stuff like that. And like, it's our values that protect gays and stuff like that. And these people don't care about protecting the rights of gay people and queer people and all that sort of stuff, but they'll use it as a hammer in the culture wars to beat it over the head of like the left wing and stuff like that. Like they will use it as a weapon, as a tool, and they don't give a shit about gay people. They don't give a shit about queer people. They don't give a shit at all. But they'll use it. They'll use it. And here is the most cutting insight that we have from none other than the contributor to today's segment on propaganda. The host makes the point that if you are homosexual, you could be killed in Iran or Gaza, but neglects that an entire people are being ethnically cleansed for not being gay, but for living in an area that Israel wants to colonize. So if they really cared about like people dying in an unjust way, an unjust manner, then like shouldn't they care that the Palestinians are being killed in like by the thousands, like all the time by the Israelis? If they really care, if they really care about people like dying for something that is absurd or immoral, wouldn't they really take that to the logical conclusion that they really should support Palestinians? And it is right for gay people or queer people in Australia to support Palestinians' liberation and fight for their own sovereignty and not be killed by Israelis, even though Palestinians who are majoritively Muslims wouldn't accept them for being gay. So you could really draw the line that these gay people in Australia, or these queer people that are supporting Muslims, despite the fact that these people wouldn't like them anyway, are rising above it. They're rising above it. They're taking the high road and supporting people that probably wouldn't support them. And like, that's the real kind of way you could analyze this. But no, you have the reactionary propaganda style of doing it, which is hilarious. Like, when you look at it like for what it is, it's just this guy's trying to brainwash his audience. So let's go to the audience, shall we? Yeah, it's a great way to move the goalposts and just detract from people arguing against genocide, isn't it? It's just like, oh well, you don't want genocide, but you also like queer people, and guess who doesn't like queer people? Like, again, that's the depth of the argument. Like, it's really stupid. The first gay imam was assisted to heaven recently. I heard about that. And like, I don't remember where they were from though. I wonder if they were from Iran. Obviously, they weren't living there. But yes, I heard about that. They were assisted, yes, quote unquote. It's a selfless thing to be kind to someone, even if they hate what you are. Yes, thank you. Egypt, yeah, sad. And like an activist for like decades, I think, on that issue too. So like, pretty brave, because like you'd cop a lot of flack from your own community. I am going to do some quick plugs because we've got people that to be honest, I haven't seen before in this chat or on a stream. So if that's you, come and join us over on the Discord. That's where we have conversations like this, and we share propaganda with one another in the hope of revolutionizing the consciousness of the masses. So there's an invite to the Discord. If that's you and you're not over there, do yourself a favor, come over to the Discord. And if you want like notifications from me, so like you can just be across like, streams and all that sort of stuff, because social media doesn't give out proper notifications, go over and become a member for free on Patreon, and you can get notifications through that. So let's go through this comment section, because I'm sure it's going to be eye-opening, rather depressing, but at times funny. So let's see. Quiz for Palestine is like chickens for KFC. 59k likes. And that's a ratio usually, the likes to dislikes. So like, even with all the dislikes or potential dislikes, it's still 59k. That's interesting. 495 replies. Jesus. Ain't that the truth? Muslim LGBTQ plus meeting has been moved to the rooftop. That one. The first one is enlightening. The second one is like, it just captures the real dark and sinister notion, but behind this entire piece of propaganda is just like, it's all like, it's about death and glorifying death for these people. So like, you might as well, if you want to support this stuff, you might as well be dead or kill yourself or something like that. It's akin. Being like an activist for a cause, like fighting for somebody else, even though they wouldn't fight for you, you might as well kill yourself, kind of thing. Pretty dark. That's like saying Jews for Nazis. How ridiculously out of touch and ignorant can you be? I see a general trend forming, and we've only got 3 down the line so far. The comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. Pretty good way to put it. Yeah, well, like, is that about Queers for Palestine, or is that about this piece of content? Because you could say the exact same thing. Like, there's not a lot of thought that went into this piece. Like, as scathing as it is, like, kind of thing. There's not a lot of thought that went into it. Like, it's pretty lowbrow. Because, like, like we talked about, like, people that are supporting Palestine are supporting Palestine because they don't want people to be killed and displaced. This isn't a movement that aligns with gay rights activism. Dear Queers for Palestine, if you plan on visiting Gaza or any other Muslim nation, you You'll only need a one-way ticket. Look at this, celebrating the death of people, of snowflakes, basically. How brainwashed, uneducated, and completely detached from reality do these people have to be? It's insane. If Queers for Palestine actually lived in Palestine, they'd be moving to Israel. At least some media is telling the truth. Well done, Sky. Well done, Sky. I saw lots of Palestinian flags during Pride marches in June. It's unbelievable what people will support when there's a bandwagon on the loose. I think what the reactionary sentiment in the general population is really unaware of is that, like, any support for kind of any national liberation movement that is outside of like the imperial core of capitalism is a support for a break with the domination of capitalism over the entire world. Like, it's basically a fight over, like, or a fight against forms of colonialization. And so, like, you could rename Palestine, you could pick it up and put it in some other part of the world if you wanted to. If it's a national liberation movement against the mechanisms of global capitalism and the imperial core, so like the advanced imperial nations, and that's what this is. Like, Israel represents like the imperial core in the Middle East, and so like any kind of national liberation movement against that, they just don't understand that, like, it's really not just about Palestinians. It's about like human liberation against the larger kind of ideological framework and the larger mechanisms of like global economics and stuff like that, and global warfare. It's about like human liberation. But like, you know, I guess that's the point of this type of propaganda, isn't it? To speak to the converted. Queers for Palestine, atheists for Palestine, women for Palestine, seculars for Palestine. It's equally stupid in reality. Yes, you can never support something if there is any contradictions in what you do. You can never, ever support something if there's any contradiction anywhere along the line. Remember that. In the UK, it did happen. A group of Queers for Palestine turned up dressed in rainbow plus PLA flags, only to be told by protest organizers they did not want or need their support, as they wouldn't be tolerated in Gaza. They were literally surprised. This is how little they know about what they are supporting. Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Someone's watched the Napoleon movie and thinks that they're really cultured. Imagine not being wanted, not being normal. Have to force yourself an ideology where it's not wanted and call it pride. Yeah, I think this is generally just picking up on two strands of hate. It's like people don't like queer people or gay people, and people don't like Palestinians. I think that's all that is going on here. But like, that's how the propaganda machine works on the reactionary sense. It is about picking up on the contradictions in identity politics on the left, and like absolutely no recognition, obviously, of their own inherent contradictions and ironies, but like picking up on like the ironies of the identity politics and culture wars associated with the left. Now, this is why I've been on a rant about getting rid of like removing ourselves from identity politics, the culture wars, and removing ourselves from the more rabid notions and sentiments within wokeism, because like none of that stuff supports a revolutionary struggle against the mode of production being based on capital. None of it really represents that. Some of it might work in the same direction, but like a lot of it, when taken like this, works against it. And so like identity politics is nice. It's not a hill to die on, and it is not our end battle. Our end battle is with capital. before capital turns into something worse, like techno-feudalism or something like that. We are running out of time with this one. The first comment is enlightening. I don't think that $1 Koshi has ever had a thought ever. I think he's RoboCop. How many Muslim nations have these commenters actually been to? I'm guessing 0. Yeah, exactly right. A win for the oppressed is a win for humanity. That's right. And like, this is a very particular form of oppression. It's outside, like I was saying, kind of the developed world, the Western developed world especially. And it is emblematic of the colonial phase of capitalists, like kind of expansion over the globe. And so like, once you have these periphery, like colonialists setting posts in the capitalist world develop their own means of production, develop their own populations, their own working classes, all that sort of stuff, you have more of a base for a socialist kind of world revolution, in the sense that you will have an industrial population throughout the world. You'll have more autonomous countries, and you'll have people that are able to kind of look out for their own interests and like form federations and coalitions with other developed countries, as opposed to being kept down by advanced countries for their own benefit and for basically the expansion of profit. They can understand universalist solidarity. They can't understand, yeah, it is a frightening notion. Yes, because like it helps other people develop, and like the imperial core is only really held together by the fact that everyone else is not developed. And that's why BRICS is so scary in China, because China's going around developing everyone and pouring all of their excess capital into developing everyone's infrastructure, bringing them into the 20th and the 21st century, and industrializing people that have been kept and suppressed by like the CIA and like the broader imperial machine for like 100 years now. Really suppress these people, keep them absolute on the brink of despair, starvation, and destruction, and like the profits will stay in the advanced capitalist nations. I'm getting 0 comments through after mentioning the Rothschilds being responsible for colonialism and via capitalism, and as apparently responsible for the state of Israel too, apparently. Yeah, wow. You've said the naughty word, so you can't say Rothschilds. And there was another word that somebody was trying to say before. Oli Atlas. No, Brandon Knox was trying to say something before. Like climate change. I got just tune back in, and it might sound like a silly question, but what do the actual Palestinians think that they are fighting for? Is any of this in their thoughts? Is it down to basis of survival or freedom? Like, to be honest, like, I don't know what individual Palestinians are fighting for. They probably have varied opinions on this, but like, I don't even think the Palestinians are too adverse generally for a 2-state solution. They just want to be left alone. Like, it really has been for the longest time, up until like more recent events. They have been living in basically kind of a 2-state world anyway, like since probably like the 80s or the 90s. And like, they just kind of like, Israel just kind of took what it wanted and has been kind of expanding bit by bit. But like, they kind of just lived and did their own things in kind of juxtaposition to each other, and they just don't want to be fucking eradicated and kicked off the land like completely. I think they just want to be left alone, to be honest. But I'm not an expert in this, but I have been following it for long enough, and I've been reading Chomsky talk about this for long enough. Like, he's been going on about Israel and Palestine for decades and decades, well before it was popular. But like, that's kind of what Chomsky does, let's be honest. But like, yeah, they just kind of want to be left alone. And I think they were down for like a 2-state solution as a conglomerate for a long time. And like, most of the world was there. Like, I don't even think they wanted to even get rid of Israel altogether. They just, again, they wanted some solution and like kind of end to the fighting. But like, if what is developing now is a